They say art is beautiful, but Goya's work? It's something darker, something visceral, and something you can't unsee. Today, we're diving into one of the most haunting and unforgettable pieces of art ever created, Francisco Goya's Saturn Devouring His Son. It's grotesque, it's shocking, and it's packed with meaning. At first glance, it's just horrifying, a god eating his own child. But as we dig deeper, you'll see that this painting is much more than just a gruesome myth brought to life. It's a window into Goya's mind, the chaos of his time, and a raw depiction of human fears that we still wrestle with today. By the end of this video, you might not look at mythology, or even art, the same way again. Let's get started. Okay, let's break this down. We see a monstrous figure, Saturn, in the midst of devouring his son. His wide, bulging eyes stare directly at us, filled with both madness and terror. His hair is wild and unkempt, and his mouth is stretched unnaturally as he bites into the lifeless body of his child. The painting is drenched in darkness, with Saturn's pale, almost corpse-like skin standing out against the void-like background. And the details? Oh, they're brutal. Blood drips from the torn flesh of the son, who's barely human anymore. His body is limp, contorted, and horrifyingly incomplete. Saturn's hands grip him with a kind of desperate force, almost as if he can't stop himself. There's no stage, no props, no sense of time or place, just Saturn and his unspeakable act. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would anyone paint something so horrifying? Stick with me, because Goya had some powerful reasons. First, let's talk about the myth that inspired this nightmare. Saturn is the Roman version of Cronus, a titan from Greek mythology. The story goes that Cronus, or Saturn, heard a prophecy that one of his children would overthrow him, just like he overthrew his own father. So, what does he do? Instead of facing his fears like a normal person, he eats each of his children as soon as they're born. Gruesome, right? But there's more. In the myth, his wife, Rhea, eventually tricks him by hiding their youngest son, Zeus, and giving Saturn a rock to eat instead. Zeus grows up, overthrows his father, and, well, you know how mythology loves its revenge plots. This painting captures the moment of Saturn devouring one of his children. But here's the thing, Goya's Saturn doesn't look like a god. He looks feral, almost animalistic. This isn't just a myth anymore. It's a deeply personal and terrifying image of power gone horribly wrong. Now, let's shift gears and talk about Francisco Goya, the man behind the madness. By the time Goya painted Saturn Devouring His Son, he was an old man living in near isolation. He had gone deaf in his later years, suffered from mental and physical illnesses, and was deeply disillusioned with society. This painting was part of what's called the Black Paintings, a series of works Goya painted directly onto the walls of his house. And get this, these weren't meant to be seen by anyone else. They were private, almost like Goya's personal diary in paint form. The Black Paintings are dark, disturbing, and unlike anything else from that time. They're a raw look at Goya's fears, frustrations, and inner turmoil. So why Saturn? Well, some art historians think Goya used the myth as a metaphor for Spain's political situation. The early 19th century was a chaotic time in Spain. Wars, corruption, and a monarchy that seemed more interested in self-preservation than the well-being of its people. In this context, Saturn could represent those in power, devouring their own people out of greed or fear. But it's also possible that Goya saw Saturn as a reflection of himself, a man consumed by his own fears and darkness. Let's dig into the symbolism, because this painting is loaded with it. First, there's Saturn himself. His monstrous appearance, the wild eyes, the hunched posture, makes him look more like a beast than a god. This could symbolize how power and fear can strip someone of their humanity, turning them into something monstrous. Then there's the sun. In the myth, Saturn's children represent his fears of being overthrown. But here, the sun's lifeless body could symbolize innocence, hope, or even the future. all destroyed by Saturn's paranoia. It's like Goya is asking, what are we willing to sacrifice out of fear? And the darkness? It's more than just a backdrop. The void-like background creates a sense of isolation and hopelessness. There's no escape, no light, no redemption. It's as if Saturn's act exists in a world where nothing else matters, just his all-consuming fear and violence. Finally, let's not overlook the raw, almost unfinished style of the painting. The rough brushstrokes and lack of polish make it feel immediate and visceral, like a nightmare pulled straight from Goya's mind. Before we move on, here are a few interesting facts about Saturn Devouring His Son. First, it wasn't painted on canvas. Like I mentioned earlier, Goya painted this directly onto the walls of his house. It wasn't transferred to canvas until years after his death. Then, it's worth mentioning that this piece is part of a bigger collection. The black paintings include 14 works in total, each one as dark and disturbing as this. They're housed in the Prado Museum in Madrid today, so you can see them all in person, if you're brave enough. Lastly, it's inspired countless interpretations. Over the years, people have seen Saturn as everything from a symbol of tyranny to a representation of Goya's own guilt and fears. To really understand this painting, you have to look at the time Goya was living in. The early 1800s were a turbulent period in Spain. The country was caught in the chaos of the Napoleonic Wars, and the Spanish Inquisition was still a looming presence. Goya had witnessed unspeakable violence and corruption, and it clearly left a mark on him. At the same time, Goya was grappling with personal struggles. His health was failing, his relationships were strained, and his once bright view of humanity had grown dark. This painting is a product of all that, a mix of personal pain and a grim view of the world around him. So, what do we take away from Saturn Devouring His Son? On one level, it's a chilling depiction of a myth, but on a deeper level, it's a reflection of human nature, our fears, our desires, and the monstrous things we're capable of when those two collide. Goya's painting forces us to confront the darker sides of ourselves and reflect on the consequences of unchecked fear and power. It's not just a story about gods or myths. It's about us, our societies, and the way we navigate our own darkness. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of Goya's Saturn Devouring His Son. If this video made you think, question, or even shudder a little, let me know in the comments. What do you think Goya was trying to say with this work? And what symbolism stood out to you the most? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of art and the stories behind the canvas. Until next time, keep looking closer, because sometimes the most profound truths are hiding in the shadows. See you soon.